So I'm sure people ask you all the time, what's that one thing you'll take in the event of a disaster? And of course, I would take my girlfriend. But if you're talking toys, it would be, and there's like, not one thing. So there's this shelf right here, which is small. It's like 12 by 12, maybe. And it contains everything that would make me happy if I could just save it. So let's start with the first figure I ever got, which was this dude right here. Darth Vader. That guy started all this madness. I don't really remember much of anything before Star Wars. I just remember Star Wars. I remember the $6 Million Man before Star Wars, and then I got this guy, and everything changed from there. And my entire childhood was dominated by Star Wars, and this guy started it all. Now, originally, if you got a really early version of this guy, he came with a double telescoping lightsaber here. This is the single piece, but that's something that if you have in your collection is worth a lot of money. Not this guy. The second figure I remember getting as a kid was Chewbacca. And I remember being so excited to get this guy because back then this guy was really big, for an action figure. So it was like you're really getting your money's worth, And I remember grabbing him and just constantly staring at him because he was so huge. And Darth Vader was a large format figure too for this series of figures, I suppose. And also the gun was so unique that it was a really cool figure to own. And it's Chewbacca, man. So Chewbacca was actually part of the first 4 figures that came out. Kenner wasn't ready for Star Wars when it came out in '77. Well, they weren't ready for the figures for the Christmas season of '77. They weren't expecting Star Wars to do this as good as it did. So what they did was they came up with the certificate program where you would purchase this cardboard display, which is pretty cool looking, and you would get the certificate, and you would mail in the certificate with all your information, and in a few months you would get these 4 figures right here called the Early Bird figure set. And you would get these in the mail before anybody else would get them, or before stores got them. And there would be your figures. And again, some of the earlier boxes came with a Luke Skywalker that had a double telescoping lightsaber as well. So the cool thing was getting these in the mail. The thing I thought that sucked was you kind of missed out on some really cool stuff, like for instance, the awesome artwork on the card backs. And the thing is that back then, we didn't have access to Star Wars the way kids have access today, where they can just pop it in anytime they want and watch it. And then there's a plethora of books and magazines and pictures and this and that you have now, that you can see things you never even remember seeing originally in the theatrical release. So having those card backs was the only, one of the only things you could do to enjoy the movie beyond not being able to see it, because once it's gone for a few years until they decide to put it back into theaters. After Chewbacca, I don't really remember. Everything became a blur when I got what I got. I remember soon after Chewbacca that I did get this guy, which the reason I remember that is because I got an X-Wing for Christmas, and X-Wing needed a Luke Skywalker X-Wing pilot. That's what I told my parents. So I remember getting that guy soon after. Then these guys were my obsession with Star Wars when I was a little kid. I loved the cantina scene, and I always thought it was too short because when I did get to see the movie, it was just it went too fast and I couldn't focus on everything, and I wanted to see Hammerhead and really study him, and all these awesome things that you could do now by for, you know, pausing and whatnot. So they originally came out in the Sears playset that had a little cantina front, and you would line them up in front of this little cardboard playset. So LucasArts had given Kenner a black and white photo of Snaggletooth, but it was just the torso, and since it was black and white, they weren't sure what color he was wearing and since it was just the torso, they didn't know how tall or short he was. So what they did was they released this guy with the playset, and he was completely wrong, which was fine with me because I think he's kind of cool. So eventually they fixed it, and you got the little red dude right there, and I consider Blue Snaggletooth to be part of the first 21, even though that makes him 22, so that's why he's there. The reason there's 23 figures in my 21 collection is because this guy, he belongs to the Jawa Droid Factory playset, and he's really awesome because when he came out, I was really fascinated by the fact that he had 3 legs, unlike the original R2 who only has 2. So that was really neat. One of the figures I do wish I had carded is R5D4, again because I used to stare at him. Because same reason, you know, you don't really have access to the film, so when you would see something like, wow, there's another droid and it looks just like R2, but you only got like a few seconds to see him in the film, and then you see the card back and it's Luke and he's kneeling down, he's checking out this droid and it looks awesome. That's what I remember from my childhood about this card, so I'd like to find it. I know I can find it pretty easily, I just don't want to pay over like $30 for it. So if you know, I'll take like really busted cards, I don't care. I just like to get my hands on a card, so if you know of anybody, I'm your man. And when I say I'll take a busted card back, the first card back I ever purchased, and I believe I paid about $30 for it, and I don't know what the hell somebody did to this, but I don't know if you can see that, but they really took it through the ringer. It's almost like they wanted to fit it in their pocket or something. So I got this for $30, but you know, a few years ago, of course. Now probably who knows what the hell people want for a crap like this. But if I could find an R5D4 in this, or even lesser condition, but at least where I can see the entire card back, for really cheap, you know. I know I won't find it for $30, but you know, I don't want to pay over $100 for it. Contact me, please. Thank you very much. Now, some people collect variants. I don't really care about variants. The only one I would love to have is the Jawa variant. This guy also came in a vinyl cape version, and I have this right here, but that's not real. See, that's a band cape that I cut. I had an extra band cape, so I cut it to size, just as a placeholder, because I would love to get one, but ever since the prices went nuts, I don't think I'll ever have one. But that's the only variant I would love to own. Otherwise, I don't really care about the variants. I have a few, but I don't really put a lot of value into it. The main variant I have is, there are 2, well, I don't know if there's any other kind of variant for this figure, but there's 2 Hans. There's Big Head Han, which is right there. And then there's really suave, supposedly Little Head Han. And Big Head Han, to me, always looked like Fonzie from the Happy Days series. The reason I keep Big Head, I was going to say Big Head Fonz. The reason I keep Big Head Han on display and not little head, or Fonz, there I go again, Han, is because that's the sculpt I played with when I was a kid. So that's the one I have the most nostalgia for. Now, when we were kids, the cloth Jawa was actually an upgrade, and we thought it was cool, better than the vinyl cape version. In fact, people who had the vinyl cape version, kids who had the vinyl cape version when the cloth version came out, were a little jealous of the cloth version. And there's a few variants with the Jawa that people go nuts over, with the stitching, the color of the stitching, and it just gets silly. Just buy a Jawa and shut up. Alright, and then there's Boba Fett, which I didn't actually get until maybe like 1981, because I remember getting him with the Slave One ship for Christmas once. But I remember seeing him in the Christmas special. There was a cartoon that he was featured in, and he was a badass in that cartoon. But if you didn't see that, you never really had a reference to him, but you were aware of him for some reason because he was cool, and you just bought stuff because there was also this 12-inch figure that I got down here that came out in '79, I think, way before The Empire Strikes Back. So this guy was always awesome, always my favorite, one of my favorite figures, if not the favorite. And you all know the stories about the Fire and Boba Fett, so I won't bore you. And that's mine, which I think he's in pretty good shape. And then of course we have the illustrious Death Squad Commander, later to be known or renamed Star Destroyer Commander, because I think Death Squad was just too much for the kids. I think once Lucas had kids. You got the Stormtrooper. Not much to say about that. Just trying to find a really nice, clean Stormtrooper is really hard. Try to stay away from trying to retro bright these things. Just leave them the way they are. If they're not bright white, don't worry about it. If that bothers you, make sure you buy only the best figures you can afford. Then there's the Death Star droid, which is interesting because I was always really fascinated about this droid, because I always assumed it was the droid, based on the picture from the card back, it was the droid that was in the Jawa Sandcrawler. I never knew until later on that there was an actual Death Star droid that walked past Chewbacca, Han, and Luke when they're waiting for the elevator on the Death Star. Because again, sensory overload. When you're a kid and you're watching Star Wars, all these things happen. You miss it. You didn't have the ability to, rewind and play it again. So I always assumed he was that guy, but who knows? I guess that's the Death Star droid that's on the Death Star, because why would he be called the Death Star droid if he's on the Jawa Sandcrawler? Then there's this little guy, and now people started calling this guy a Gonk droid, and I don't know when, because I never heard that. When I was a kid, I never heard Gonk droid. I heard, Power droid. But Gonk droid, now I understand why they call him a Gonk droid, because of, the noises he makes. But see, I always thought this guy was actually the power droid that you see walking through the homestead when Luke is introduced. And he calls over to Aunt Beru. And there's a little blue power droid walking there, and I always thought that was this guy, not the one in the Sandcrawler, because the Sandcrawler is a gray guy. And then they started calling him a Gonk droid, and I hate that, because nobody ever calls him a Gonk droid. When did that happen? I didn't hear about that until the internet, stupid internet. Same thing with Luke. This is Luke Skywalker, alright? Then later on they had like a Hoth Luke, a Bespin Luke, a Jedi Luke, They never had a farm boy Luke. It was just Luke Skywalker and then the rest. When the hell did this guy become farm boy Luke? In the 90s. I hate that term. Don't use it. This is Luke Skywalker. Just, that's it. That's all I wanted to say about that. And then there's Obi-Wan Kenobi. He's another one, if you got him early on, he had a double telescoping lightsaber. And there's also a variant. There's a white hair and a gray hair variant. Then you got the whiniest bitch in Star Wars, C-3PO. Nothing much to say about that guy. Similar to the Death Star droid. And then for you unpolitically correct folk out there, the Sand People. Not the Sand Person, not the Tusken Raider, Sand People. Now he's got a variant as well. And those two little protruding things on his cheek, they have hollow versions of that. So he's a little pricey if you find him with hollow cheeks. I don't care. So, all these figures, including that case up there, because that's my favorite case, that's what I would take with me in the event of a disaster. And that would be enough for me to be happy. In fact, if I lost everything or if I had to sell everything, I just was able to keep just this one little shelf right here, I'd be like totally happy for the rest of my life. So there you go.